Joining me today is Representative Neal Kurk from New Hampshire, and he's the chair of the House Finance Committee. Neal, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure, John. So,
I know when I have the chair of the House Finance Committee on, it's all budget all the time. So let's start with there. Just as a sort of a background, the House passed a budget, the Senate passed a budget, the governor put a budget on the table. They were all different numbers. Can you just give me a quick overview of all three budgets?
The governor proposed an $11.5 billion budget that had $129 million of new taxes and fees in it to support her higher level of spending. That budget then went to the House. The House has its own revenue estimates and found them to be considerably lower than those that the governor used. And so the House had to reduce not just the governor's budget, but reduce current spending levels. And that was a very difficult thing to do when you cut services for people. We didn't have enough money to fully fund the Department of Transportation. People were concerned that highways wouldn't be plowed in the winter or maintained in summer. But we worked around that. The House budget went to the Senate. When the Senate did their own revenue estimates, they found them much, much higher. And so the Senate came out with an $11.3 billion budget, $200 million below the governor, but still a very significant increase from the current $10.7 billion budget under which we're now operating. The House and the Senate then met in a committee of conference on the budget, and because the House revenue estimators had new information that we didn't have in March, but they did have in June, they produced much higher revenue estimates, and the Senate agreed to the House's revenue estimates. On the basis of that, the House basically agreed to the Senate budget, because had we had the Senate's higher revenue estimates at the time the House did its budget, those are the spending areas where we would have put money. For example, we increased by 50% the amount of money we're spending on substance abuse treatment and prevention, alcohol, drugs, and so forth, because of some of the more recent epidemics. But we could only do that in the House when we found that the revenues were expected to be significantly higher. The result of this is now a budget which yesterday was passed by House and Senate and sent on to the governor. The governor...
And that budget yesterday that was passed party line?
Pretty much so, yes.
And that's $11.3 billion?
Yes.
And in the last biennium, the budget was $10.7 billion.
Correct.
$500 million increase. $600 million.
Approximately, yes. And that's due to the fact that as time has gone on and we've recovered from the Great Recession, our revenues are coming in increasingly strongly. Business revenues, for example. In this month, in June, roughly halfway through the month, we found that we were $2 million ahead of what we expected in business taxes alone. So things are looking up in that regard.
So the governor's pledged to veto that. Will she veto it?
I think she will. She has a number of problems with it. First, the budget includes business tax cuts starting in our fiscal year 17. It's roughly an 11% cut over 5 years in business taxes. The House and the Senate are convinced that if we're to encourage growth in New Hampshire, new businesses, expanded businesses, businesses moving in from elsewhere, we have to take a whole new tack in how we deal, how we present the state to business. And part of that, one part of that, and only one part, is reducing tax rates. And that's what we did. The governor's concerned that over the long run we will lose more revenue than we will gain. Obviously, everybody can cite his own statistics and studies to support his position. But the House and Senate believe that we will, in fact, increase business at a much faster rate, and therefore our taxes from business in the future will be much higher than the amount of money we're giving off due to the reduced rates.
So I want to stay, we have about a minute left, I want to stay sort of with the summary issue. Concurrent to passing the 11.3, knowing that it was going to be vetoed, you passed a continuing resolution?
Yes.
So talk me through that real quickly.
Continuing resolution simply says that for the next 6 months, the government will operate on the current budget. You can spend up to half of your current budget in the next 6 months, and that's it.
So, and did that,
business as usual.
Was that bipartisan ultimately?
Ultimately, that was a bipartisan vote because the Democrats realized that if the governor would veto the budget and there were no continuing resolution, government would literally shut down just before the 4th of July weekend, which is a big tourist weekend in New Hampshire, and no one wanted that.
Okay. So, and it's unlikely that she'll veto that one?
No, it's almost certain she'll sign that.
Okay.
New Hampshire will be open for tourists and business on July 1st in the same way it was on June 30th.
Well, that's great. We'll stop right there.